Basically, I would have to say that the best story that I have as a child is my trip to the actual most well, how would you put it? My trip to the most boring place I've ever been to, which isn't Kentucky. But let me finish the Kentucky story. And if we have time, I'll tell you the Ohio story. So, I'm about 13 years old, and we go to spend a week in Kentucky. Now, I liked Kentucky. Like, as far as seeing someplace new, but it didn't really have a lot for me as a 13-year-old, because a lot of people will tell you, like, you talk and imagine how angering this is for a parent, but talking to me now is about the same as it was talking to me since I was 5. I drove my parents insane. I'm sorry. I apologize for my past transgressions, because I know it had to be awful having me constantly talking back. Constantly debating points after a 40-hour work week. I'm sure my parents didn't appreciate it. Okay. But anyway, I do see the comment you made, underestimated the far enough into Mexico. This makes me think you got a whole story about Mexico. I do, but I'm not going to tell it. Maybe another day. Oh my God. That is not why. That is not why underestimated. Basically, so we spend all this time in Kentucky. I'm a fan of old school country before it became pop. And I actually felt like there was some sort of soul in the music. So all the things in Kentucky celebrating such music and whatever and whatnot, I enjoy it. But on a list of places that I've been to, there's only one place that could evenly compare with how boring Kentucky is. And I apologize to anyone from Kentucky. It's not pH balanced for me. So, get into this story, because this story is funny AF. So, we're leaving. Now, we drove to Kentucky. Bean, you don't even know where Kentucky is, sir. Coming up in here hot. Anyway, so we're leaving Kentucky, driving out, because we had driven. So we're driving out. And as we're leaving Kentucky, my dad looks at me in the rearview mirror and he says, "So how'd you like Kentucky?" I thought about it for a few minutes. I was like, didn't really like it. My dad turned and looked at me, and he said, "You don't get to talk until we get home." As I'm sure you're imagining at this moment, I'm in hell. My talkative ass, I am in hell. So, just because I don't want to embellish. So I'm going to actually look this up. That is exactly 7 hours and 18 minutes. And there were stops, okay? There were stops for food. There were stops for bathroom. So let's go ahead and just say 8 hours of me not being able to talk. So I'm sure y'all can imagine my face. They're talking about stuff, and I got opinions. They're talking about stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I want to say something so bad. But see, what they didn't know is your boy was a ninja. Your boy is a ninja. So I was like, control, inner peace. I stayed quiet that entire trip. We're driving down my street back home. We pull in the driveway. Once we're in the driveway, I'm like, oh, home. My dad beat my ass. We weren't technically in the house yet. So he used technicalities to give me a whooping for talking before we got home because I didn't like Kentucky. Purely trumped up charges. Honestly, a 13-year-old who stays quiet for 8 hours and I can't even get a reprieve when I think that I'm home in the driveway, the car is parked. We are technically on the property constituting home. And I get an ass whooping for talking before I took 20 steps to get inside the house, which apparently is scientifically home. I needed Johnny Cochran. That's what I needed somebody to defend my stance on the situation. Underestimated? Nailed it. See, I never knew. You don't live outside. Rags, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. You're supposed to have my back. I was 13. Anyway, son of a bitch. So, you nailed it though. Underestimated. I never knew. And he never told me or explained to me why I was put on timeout. Why I couldn't speak for 8 hours. And why I got my ass whooped for not liking Kentucky. But years later, I didn't go over this in this podcast because when I told the other story, I prefaced it with it. But I said that I would tell the story of why I got my ass whooped for Kentucky and why I believe I deserved it. And underestimated, you nailed it. That's why. It wasn't until I became a lot older that I slowly started to realize two things. One, the fact that my parents are still together, I know that just came out of left field, but the fact that my parents are still together is so rare. I honestly think I'm the only person out of almost every single person I know whose parents have been together my entire life and are still together. It's rare as fuck. But also what I realized, more pertinent to the story, is that I traveled way more than a lot of people. Like, way more. Like, I was a traveling son of a bitch. And yeah, my dad never explained why he gave me the whooping, but my understanding as I got older was because he thought I was being underappreciative of being able to travel to Kentucky. What he didn't realize, and I still understand his viewpoint, and I will still say I deserve the whooping, but that wasn't what I was saying at all. That was just a preference That was me analyzing all the places that I've been and ranking it. And I'm sorry, but Kentucky ranks in the bottom of all the places I've been, even in the U.S. So, I mean, I'm just going to say that the level of ass whoopings that I got as a child, like, most would agree with you. But I'm a hard-headed motherfucker. Let's get it real. I'm stubborn as a bitch. Like, I probably deserved more. And when I see these kids out here that didn't get their ass whooped and how they think the world works, there was only... I told the story the first time, but the only whooping that I personally think I didn't deserve out of my whole life was the whooping that I got for playing chess. If you want that story... you'll have to go back to the other podcast. I actually have a clip of me telling just that story. It's actually really hilarious. Pull up my YouTube, and it's one of the first videos that you'll see on uploads. I did it fairly recently. I see it happen to other kids nowadays, and I can't stand it. What? Did they get an ass whoop? These kids out here today are animals.